Right, next day now. Hopefully you can see enough, but back on this, I've got one chassis leg partially made. I've decided I'm not going to spot weld it to the floor either. I'm going to stitch weld it so it's a bit stronger, so we've got a proper connection between the back and the front. I'm about to make this chassis section, so I'll come back in after I've made that, because you've already seen me make one, and then I can finally get the floor welded in. I've decided I'm going to trim the floor there and just spot weld that lip, but I will fold the bottom over and spot weld through to give that bit of strength. I don't think it's worth folding the top bit over. I want to make sure I've got a tight connection, which I won't be able to do unless I can see the joint. Totally forgot to record this, so I've got to linish this back. This is the first chassis leg, and I've welded in some nuts from the back. Hopefully you can see from there. I've put a couple of folds, so I've got the folds to match the back panel and going all the way around. Obviously I just need to knock all this back now, and that leg, and I've got to put a couple of holes in. In fact, I'll weld that there and I'll put a couple of holes in that one, and that leg is pretty much ready, bar a little bit of cleaning up at the back end. I might gusset it in the middle as well, but I can do that after it's in. So I reckon that's going to be strong enough to put it on a rollover anyway if I need to. Alright, so here we are, linished back. Done one hole on that side, obviously two on that side. I'm going to seam weld that corner on that side anyway. Obviously we're welding in, that's a completely boxed section at the end, and then this is going to be boxed over the top anyway with 1mm plate. So hopefully that'll fit quite nicely on the back panel. The bolts are going to angle downwards, but that'll just mean that it can have a bar run across at the angle, which isn't an issue. So I just need to make another one of these, and I'll try and film a little bit more. Apologies for the noise, it's just started levering it down. Hopefully you just saw then, I've got both chassis legs clamped in place now, just roughly. I've got the floor in. The floor just wants a little bit of weight putting down there before I spot weld it. It's still got a little bit of a bending from doing the swage lines. I've actually decided I'm just going to cut that off flush. I think by just having it flush and one seam across the back is probably going to be better if there's ever any water ingress or anything like that. Where I'm going to be dropping the chassis legs, I will have to put a little filler piece in there, and my bending machine wouldn't quite get the bends completely square, so I will have to clamp all these to get them in place. But the floor's looking pretty good now. On the inside, looks pretty smart as well. Obviously, need to cap these, and I'll bang a couple of gussets in, I think. So probably I'll seam weld that round on both of them, inside and out, so there and there. I need to chop that off I'll take the floor out and I'm actually going to weld the chassis legs in before the floor goes in. So what I'm thinking, I'll put a piece of 1mm plate just at the bottom of the chassis leg there, and I'll weld them in fully, both level with one another, and then we'll slip the floor in, because that way I'll show you now. I'll just take the floor out so you can see. Alright, so with the floor out, you can see now I can spot weld them really easily from down here, and I can also seam weld down the side there. I mean, that's quite a big gap now, but I can weld that from this angle and do that one as well. And that one may be a bit of a push unless I can square it over a little bit, but there's definitely something I can do from down here. So even if it's just one side and the other side I've got to put a little bit of a lip on it, but it's going to be a lot easier to do from down here than up at the top. Here is where we're up to. So I've got some inch box section welded in, sorry, not welding, clamped in, and it's nice and level from side to side. I've got some 1mm packers on the chassis legs, and we're ready, clamped up, ready to weld round there, down the sides, both of them, and down there, down there, down there. Hopefully I'm going to be able to do that. With this being 2mm, I should be able to get a thick bead on and then do a second bead, and that should be fine. Still need to finish welding that up before that section of floor can go in, but that's not a massive issue. And what I'll do is I'll push a piece of copper behind there so I can fill them holes in before I put the floor in as well. Should have done that yesterday, but I didn't. And then we're pretty much ready to think about putting the floor in. Chassis leg is now, well, both chassis legs actually are welded in, at least from the bottom. So managed to get that seam welded to that, the inner back panel on both sides. It started off okay, but I had to do it quite thick at the bottom, so there's 2, possibly 3 passes on that side, and then that was the same. I had to do a couple of passes, and that one, if you remember, was even more. So it'll clean up anyway. I've welded that from the bottom, so that needs a good bit of cleaning up. The only thing is, stupidly I didn't realise I've welded it to the back panel, which I wanted to be loose, though it isn't loose at that end, so it's not a massive issue. And I did pick up one spot weld came through, but you can see there where the chassis leg is, the end cap that I put in with the 2 bolts. Same on that side, so they're flush against the back panel. And I've just put up a couple of mould grips so you can see it will come in quite nicely. There's no point now, I've been deliberating over whether to try and get a rear panel, but all I've got to do is that tiny little repair there, and that. So it's just not worth it. The only thing that's going to be maybe a little bit difficult is trying to get that shape in for where the bumper mounts onto. But the Cosworth Illusion fiberglass bumper anyway, don't even need to go like that. So that side is on, that's not too bad. Again, not too bad there. That's not bad. And then there. So what I'll do, lower the car down, get the floor in again. In fact, I'll put the floor in now and I can mark up where I need to trim this off. So I'll do that now. I've just marked the back of the floor area. I'll see if you can, I don't know if you can see. Ready. Got a bit of a bow, obviously. Just show you the bottom. So I've put, again, a piece of box section clamped, just so I can get it in the right position. And I know everything's nice and square now to the chassis legs. So I just need to trim that section of floor. I've put some holes already for the plug wells in the floor there. I'm going to put them from the back, so I'm going to drill from the underneath. Well, I'm going to use my air punch, do a load of holes in there. What I'll do is I'll weld that first, and then I'll weld that side. So I'm going to try and get a clamp down to hold that flat, and then I'll clamp it up to the chassis rails, and I'm going to stitch weld to the chassis rails, just because I think it's going to be a bit better than just throwing a few spot welds in. So I'll stitch weld that. I'm ready to get the floor section in now permanently. So as you can see, I've got the punched holes in. I need to slip that underneath where I left the gap. It takes a little bit of messing. And this lip goes on the inside, like that. So that's it roughed in. Need to get the piece of box section in. Which is an absolute pain in the neck on the road. Using these clamps. Don't want to use that other one, it's got a rubber foot on it. So by having this box section in here, it just ensures that I've got it all nice and square. So that 90 there is meeting up very nicely with that one. So if I pull that in, it flexes this bit of floor here. So if I just tack all of them in now as it is, and then I'll seam weld around the bottom here, and there's a couple of little gaps which I'll show you in a second. we'll be good to go. So a little bit of a gap there, which I could probably tap the floor up actually. So what I think I'll do is I'll spot weld it in. I'll start in the middle and do every other, and then I can tap it into position. Once I get this nice and warm here, that bit will probably manipulate in a little bit, and then what I'm going to have to do is clamp, or maybe just push down from the top to try and get these spot welds in. But I have done it and it does go flat, so I'm not overly concerned. So I'll get this bit done now. Let me show you where I'm up to. So, as you should have just seen, just got all that spot welded in, tapped it all across, welded in the corners as well. Still need a little bit of cleaning up. That corner's all welded in. I've not decided what I'm doing here, because I may actually leave that open into the chassis, because I'm undecided, or I might just drill some holes in. Need to make a decision on that, but for now I'm leaving it, because I've still got to put an extra floor section across from there to there, and obviously I need to stitch weld across, which is easy to do. But before that's stitch welded, I want to drop the car and I want to weld the back end to there, and as you can see there's a good bit of bow in that, so I am going to have to put a piece of steel across again and hopefully figure out some way of holding it down. So that's next. This is what we're looking like, if the phone will focus. This is what we're looking like from the inside, and as you can see, bit of bowage. It actually isn't that bad, to be fair. It should be quite easy to hold down that. This is how the boot floor's looking. It was a bit tricky to film it really. I need to either joggle that edge or put a lap on the piece that's going to go from there to there. But it's stitch welded across there. Obviously we plug welded that before. Stitch welded there. Same on the other side. There's a little bit of tinning, so if you really push it down, there is a little bit from underneath. You can see a slight warp, but by the time that's hammer and dollied, it should be absolutely fine. I've got the wheel arch in. Obviously the floor then needs cutting there. Doesn't need that section. Where I stitch welded it, I warped it a bit, which is why I'm thinking of joggling this edge rather than the piece that's going to go in. So if I joggle that edge, it should straighten it up for me. It's looking pretty good. It's absolutely solid now anyway. So I need to make some gussets to go in between here. Probably just going to put one there and one there. And then I need to cap the top. And the same on this side. Capping the top as well will square it off because it has moved a little bit, that. And the gussets will keep it square as well. I'm just going to do what I've done there and just cap it with a what's it called? A bend on each side. The chassis leg as well, as you can see, there's about a 6-inch overlap welded in and out, and then obviously you can see where that's double skin down there. So I've welded that through from the inside, obviously the outside down there. I'm not going to bother across the top, there's just no point. And I've done the same on that side. That looks like there's a gap, but it's because that slopes down. So I'll just put a very gradual slope just from that bit down, and I'll just make that up with the bends as well. So that's probably going to be the next job, capping that off and putting the gussets in. Relatively confident now that that'll easily take the weight of the car. It's a lot stronger than what was there before anyway. These are some proper chassis rails, like I say, once it's got the gussets in as well. Because I'll do similar to what they've done there with the factory one, where the subframe mount is. And this is 2mm steel that I've used. They only use 1 and then doubled it up at the bottom. So I've used 2 all the way around, and then I'm going to use 1mm just to cap it. That's how the wheel arch sits. Probably going to cut that bit off there just to make it look a bit better. And then once the floor's in, that'll just be spot welded, seam welded around there, and a capping piece will be welded on there, which will come all the way down, as I've said before, and cap off right the way to make good that. Still need to decide what to do with that section, whether to just weld it up and leave a gap there, but I'm thinking water will shoot off the wheels and go in, so I think I'm going to cap it